Photo composition, the art of positioning the subjects in your photo in a way that is pleasing to the eye. Before we learn about some specific techniques that photographers use for composition, let's take a look at Henri Cartier-Bresson, a French photographer who is the master of photographic composition. Most of Henri Cartier-Bresson's famous photographs were taken in France in the 1930s and 40s.
I've been taking pictures when I was very young, I don't remember what age. I started by painting and drawing, and for me, photography was a mean of drawing, and that's all. Immediate sketch, done with intuition, and you can't correct it. If you have to correct it, it's the next picture. But life is very fluid. Well, sometimes the pictures disappeared, and there's nothing you can do. You can't tell the person, oh, please smile again, do that gesture again. Life is once, forever. Say, I'll wait for the top pictures, for great pictures. Well, it's seldom you make a great picture. You have to milk the cow quite a lot and get plenty of milk to make a little cheese.
And on that note, let's learn how to make some cheese, starting with our first rule of composition, which is called the rule of thirds. When you first start taking photographs, you'll probably place everything dead center, like this. But if you use the rule of thirds and place the lines and subjects on the third lines and the points where the lines intersect, you'll have a much more pleasing image. Let's take these photos of flowers, for example. The picture on the left has a centered composition where the middle of the flower is placed right in the middle of the photo. The picture on the right uses the rule of thirds by placing the middle of the flower where the lines intersect and lining up the stem down the right third line in the photo. The picture on the right has a much more pleasing and interesting composition than the picture on the left. Let's take a look at how to use the rule of thirds with some of the lines and subjects that you could encounter at East Middle School. First off, if your phone has the option, you'll want to turn on the grid lines so that you can more easily find the third lines on your screen. Go to Settings, Camera, and then turn on the grid. That way, when you open up your camera, you'll be able to see those third lines and easily line your subjects up with them. If your camera doesn't have an option to turn on the grid lines, you will just have to eyeball out the grid lines as best you can. Then find a subject, for example, a student standing against the wall, and then line that student's body up with one of the vertical lines, either the one on the right or the left. Don't place them in the center. And then line the horizon line of the floor, that blue stripe, up with the bottom third line. There we go. Now we have a beautiful composition and we're ready to take the photo. Look at that. As Henri Cartier-Bresson would say, magnifique. Our next composition technique is called leading lines. This technique builds off some of the things we learned last week about linear perspective. For leading lines, you find linear perspective lines that lead to a subject. These lines lead the eye to the subject and make for a pleasing composition. In this photograph, the leading lines along the post office boxes lead to the subjects of the girls standing in the corner. These lines will literally cause the viewer's eye to be drawn to the subject in your photograph. Another example here with the lines of the fence leading to the woman standing along its edge. To take a photo that uses leading lines, find a subject, for example a student leaning against the wall, and then find some lines around him and try to angle those lines so that the lines all lead straight to the subject. In this case, I had to crouch down and move my angle to the right to get those lines to point to Noah. Take the picture and notice how your eyes are drawn in towards the subject. Our third technique is cropping. Cropping involves getting close up on your subject and moving the angle so that part of the subject is actually cut off from the photo. You can see how the top half of the woman in this photograph is cut off. You can see how the back of this kayak is cut off in this photograph. To do this, find your subject, and then move very close, and then shift off to one side so that part of it is cut off. Cropping will add an element of mystery and interest to the composition of your photographs. Our fourth technique involves photographing diagonal lines. The human eye is drawn to diagonal lines over vertical and horizontal ones. So if you can angle your photo so that there are more diagonal lines than vertical and horizontal, you'll have a more pleasing composition. Avoid creating diagonal lines by tilting your camera and turning the horizon line into a diagonal. Instead, angle up or down and twist your camera so that you don't create a weird look with the horizon line. To find diagonal lines around the school, just find, first off, a big group of lines, ceiling tiles, the hinge of the door, and then twist your camera around to find an angle where the majority of the lines, or all of them, are diagonal. A photo that has a ton of diagonal lines, even if it's kind of just a random subject, will always look cool to your eye. The fifth composition technique is called framing. Framing involves finding a subject to wrap around your main subject. For example, the window around this view of the Great Wall of China, or the arm of this bench going around the student sitting on the bench, or this croquet wire goal wrapping around the kid playing croquet, or hands wrapped around me in the hallway. A frame doesn't always have to wrap completely around your subject. For example, these trees on either side of the student count as a frame. There are many different things that could act as a frame, but one possible thing is a hand. You can wrap your fingers into a circle and then position a subject inside that circle and get a cool photo of a friend in the hallway. This is a quick way to turn a simple photo into something that's more interesting and advanced. Our final technique is symmetry. If you can position your angle so that both sides of your subject match up, like you could draw a line down the middle and fold it, that symmetrical look will be a very pleasing composition. The symmetry doesn't have to be completely perfect for it to look good either. Slightly off symmetry is called asymmetry. Here's another example of a man standing in a doorway, and that's a great idea for a way we could find symmetry in the school hallways. Here's a student standing in the middle of a doorway, and I'm going to line it up so that he is positioned dead center and both sides match. And then you end up with a pretty cool symmetrical photo. Those are all of the basic composition techniques. Now, let's grab our cameras, begin looking at the world through our box, and see if we can place the subjects in a way that is pleasing to the eye. Or, as Henri Cartier-Bresson put it, let's see if we can make some cheese.